and so that way we can talk about today's lesson. So today's lesson, when we're getting into our lessons at KIP, we're getting into crescendo. And so crescendo is the targeted lessons for upcoming star. So this lesson is going to be presented to my retesters that will be testing in December for their algebra star. And so the whole point of us having crescendo is for them to get targeted skills to prepare them from the star. So that is today's lesson. There are three lessons built into this. So we have day three. That's kind of out of order. And then we have day two and then day three again, just to build on top of each other. So we have slope, and then we're going to be talking about how to find a line of a slope. And then we'll be talking about inequalities. So the first thing we want to talk about is the main goal of the lesson or the unit. The first part of our lesson, we're going to be talking about slope is so that way students understand how to find slope between 2 points. We know that slope is described in two formulas. We have the change of y over change of x, or some students like to say rise over run. That's the first targeted part of the lesson. So essentially, in the first part of the lessons, the students will practice slope. I'll model a problem. They'll have a bunch of practice, and then they'll take an exit ticket, and then we'll move on to the next part. And so after we do slope, they'll do their model problems, which we'll get further into. And then we'll get into the reteach of TEAC 8.3C. And 8.3C, we're talking about finding 2 points on the line when we're given the function, and how we can find the answer when provided a function, and also identifying our x and y intercepts. So it also builds off of day three. Again, I'll model a problem, they'll practice, they'll have an exit ticket, and then we'll move on to the third lesson if there's enough time, because our classes are 90-minute blocks. So they'll be able to have a 30-minute quiz, 30-minute quiz, 30-minute quiz, things like that. So the next thing that we want to talk about is how this connects with what students have learned and have already practiced. So a lot of this information is not new to my students because they're retesters. So they've been introduced to this information already. So it's a reintroduction. So we're connecting their prior knowledge. We're also connecting equations and equalities. The only difference between equalities and equations is either one has an equal sign or one has a greater than or less than sign. That's the only difference. You still solve them the same, except for when you're multiplying or dividing by a negative in an inequality. If you're multiplying or dividing by a negative and inequality, you're going to flip the sign. And so with that, in today's lesson, the student should be able to walk away understanding how to find an inequality, how to solve an inequality, how to find their x-intercept and their y-intercept, and how to solve equations. So I'll open up the floor for questions.
Yes, so you talked about what the students should be walk away knowing and being able to do at the end. Are there any misconceptions like prior to you teaching this that that you've kind of noticed?
Yes.
Like,
So, oh, go ahead.
no, it's
So the biggest misconception that will be for our slope is our students mixing up the our y points and our x points. So the formula states y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. A lot of students will end up putting x in the numerator or in y in the denominator. Also, they'll put the larger value first, even though the larger value will not always be the first number. So that will be the biggest misconception.
okay. Yeah, I can see them struggling with that. Um, yeah, that's the question.
How would this be presented to the students? Like, are you going to um, have this paper projected, or will they have it, or how will we present this information to the students?
Right. Awesome. Great question. So when they walk into the class, this paper will be projected onto the smart board. The students know when they come into class to grab their packets from the back, have a seat, and get started on their do now, which is typically on Google Classroom. And it's just a refresher of what they did the day before. Because I see my kids every other day. It'll be the day before.
Right.
And then so that's about 5 to 10 minutes. Give me time to take attendance, and then we'll get into the model. And the beautiful thing about Crescendo is the teacher only models one problem, but then it's academic laps throughout the whole lesson to make sure
Mhm.
students are identifying their own misconceptions and solving.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so with the model problem, we'll look here first. And so it'll say the graph of the linear function is shown on the grid. And then the question is, what is the equation of the line represented? Uh, the students already know that they need to find friendly points. And so what they'll do is they'll look at the paper, and if it goes through an exact line, that's a friendly point. So our two
Okay.
friendly points on this line are 4, 0 and 8, -7. So this is our x1. This is our y1.
Mhm.
Ah, and then we have x2 and y2. And so when we plug this into our formula, y2 will go first, y1, and then we have x2 and x1. And so when they plug this into their formula, they can plug this straight into the calculator because students have access to calculators, or you can just reduce and simplify with what we're given. And so this is -7/4, so we know what our slope is, and then we'll take the opportunity to find what the y-intercept is. So where our line crosses the y-axis, which is at 7. So they'll
Right.
identify the slope, they'll identify the y-intercept, and they'll take both and plug it into our formula, which is also called the slope-intercept form.
Right.
Mm,
Absolutely. So is it like a I do, you do, or I do, we do, you do kind of style setup? Like, is that what crescendo is? Like, I feel like that's what I'm picking
So,
up.
so essentially, it is that, but with crescendo, what we're doing is we're skipping over the we do together because I want you to be able to show me in the model. So the model will be the I do, we do together. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
started off with them, and then I want them to start walking me through the next steps. And then from there, boom, they go straight into independent practice where it's monitored.
Mm-hmm. And that goes on for give or take maybe like an hour,
This
right?
goes on for about 20 minutes for this specific lesson, and then
Okay.
they'll take an exit ticket, and then we'll move into the next part, which
Okay.
is the functions.
So it's like 3 lessons in one day type.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Correct.
okay, beautiful. I think you spoke out about it earlier, but the standard that this lesson is addressing, it was, did you say 8.5 or what was?
So for this first lesson, if we're talking about the first lesson, we're talking about the TEAC 8.2C, and I can give the exact breakdown of 8.2C. 1 second. Let me
Crescendo. It's good though. I don't think I've heard that before. That's good.
Yeah, and the whole point is so we give them a their own personal data trackers too, so that way they can keep up with their own data from their exit tickets, and it also
Mhm.
gives them an opportunity to. So the whole point of Crescendo is to intensify their learning, and so that's why we call it Crescendo, so that way they can intensify and be prepared for the start. Because when the students return from Thanksgiving break, they have about 3 days until they take the star. So if I'm
Really?
looking
Like
right.
they're taking the star this semester?
Yes, because they're retesters, so that means they took it last year and did not pass. And so they will
Oh,
sit in December. If they don't pass in December, then they'll sit in May or April. They'll sit in April again. And then they'll keep sitting in either December or April until they pass.
wow.
So for 8.2, A.2C, for Crescendo, it is write linear equations in two variables, given a table of values, a graph, and a verbal description. So in this model problem, we don't have that table of values, but we do have a graph, and they want us to come up with a sort of verbal description. But once we get into the practice of this lesson, they'll have the table, then they'll have a verbal description, and they'll have a graph.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I went ahead and looked at some of the star released questions on my end, and it actually correlates perfectly. I feel like you're definitely aligning to the teak. I see different linear functions graph, and I think that the questions are also formulated the same way. And I appreciate right there on how number 2, you're giving them a real world example as well. So I definitely think it's aligned to the TEAC standards.
Yeah, definitely. And they have different types of, they get the graphs, they get the, the equations, the algorithms, so they're exposed to a plethora of things. One last question I have, Wolf, at least for this segment of it. What are some of the key skills or vocabulary needed for mastery in this TEAC?
So for mastery in this specific TEAC in the first lesson, the key terms I want to hear them using are slope. They should be using y-intercept. They should also be using the point slope form instead of them just saying, oh, just the equation. We have 3 different forms that they're working in this specific TEAC. So it's the point slope form, the standard form, and then the slope intercept form. And so then also it'll be a rate of change. That also is a term that they need to be able to use in a sentence and be able to conceptualize that to show mastery of this TEAC.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm sorry, one more question. I thought that was last. But how are you going to communicate to the objective to students in friendly terms? Is there anything that they have that you kind of scaffold for them to understand more complicated terms?
So for that, the objective will be posted on the board.
Mhm.
So the objective is that they're going to be able to write linear equations into variables, given a table of values, a graph, and a verbal description. That's going to be posted on the board. It comes straight from the TEAC, and there'll also be a word wall that'll have the definitions of each word, so that way they can always reference it. And then there'll be anchor charts of what a linear function looks like.
Okay. Okay, yeah,
Awesome.
no. I think as long as they have like that anchor chart to reference back to, having that scaffold in case there's any misconceptions. Because I feel like essentially like the teaks on the board is more for us and administration to know what's going on in the classroom. Because I feel like the kids don't look at the, configuration board. It's more so like us and the administration. However, I feel like having
Mhm.
that scaffold as a reference, the anchor chart, could help them out in case there's any misconceptions that they need to refer back to.
For
I
sure.
completely
Yeah.
agree.
Okay.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
so do we want to get into the next lesson before we have any, or do we have any other questions?
No, I think we're good. No, I think we're good. We can go on to the next.
Okay,
Yeah.
so looking at our day 2 reteach, this is going to be TEAC 8.3C. So this is the word problem for their model problem. And so 8.3C is they need to graph linear functions on the coordinate plane and identify key features, including x-intercept, y-intercept. They need to identify their roots, also known as zeros. They'll identify their slope, and then they'll use that in mathematical real world problems. So it's building off of the previous lesson. So that's why that lesson is second, even though it does say day 2 at the top. It is the second lesson built off of the first one because the second one, we're diving a little bit deeper into what we're looking for. So the function is given. I now want you to tell me what pieces are part of this function.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm reading the TEAC. It says um they're able to represent in multiple ways and solve without technology equations, inequalities, and system of equations. So right here they're actually applying the process.
Correct.
Hmm. No, that's great. And have you seen lots of, I know at the fifth grade level, there could be a specific TEAC that has like tremendous variation, like from year to year as it's tested. On this particular TEAC or the one that we were showing earlier, do you see a lot of variation in the way it's tested? Is it like pretty predictable, or is it a little varied?
So with today's lesson, well, this lesson, not today's lesson, but this lesson specifically, the questions are typically standard because the TEAC hasn't really changed in the past and the previous years.
Mhm.
And so it's pretty predictable on what they're going to ask when it comes to the star. It's just the way that they ask it. Because the way that we prepare them, sometimes we're using that star language and making sure it's to that star rigor. But once they sit for the star test, it's just like, oh, I don't remember what rate of change stands for. I don't remember
Mhm.
how to find my slope. And it's just like calling back that memory. The good thing about Algebra 1 is that they have that reference sheet that they can always use to test. Um,
Mhm.
but it's really hard to get our students to use that. And it's also really hard to get them to use their scratch paper.
Right.
I would love to hear ideas of how to get students to use their scratch paper.
Right. Yeah, I think honestly that's the struggle for me. And you know what's interesting, especially with some of like the master kids, I think at like at the high extremities of the spectrum, like the, kids that, are low performing, sometimes they don't produce any work because they're, they have a lot of gaps. So, they just aren't able to. But some of the kids are not on the, that are higher performing, they just, I guess, try to do it all in their head, or, they just feel like it's unnecessary. But, a lot of those kids, at least in my experiences, they might get meets or low masters when all of them, if not most of them, could get a perfect 100 if had they only taken the time to, go do it with work, or even go back and check, whenever before they're asked to, okay, are you ready to submit? Did you check all of your work? They think that sometimes it's literally only, okay, did I click something on every question?
Right.
And so when I asked them, okay, did you check your work? And they're like, no. I said, go check it. And it's like 1 minute later, oh yeah, I'm done. But so I guess it's just training them. That's always the difficult part, just training them on like, no, we're gonna check it, like actually check it. So
Right.
okay. Are we in the review assessment and evidence of learning portion now?
Yes, we can go ahead and look at that.
Okay.
So like I said, for each part of the lesson, so there's three lessons, so that means there'll be three exit tickets.
Mhm.
For so one exit ticket for each lesson. So they'll have a total of three exit tickets for the day. If we don't get to that third exit ticket, they'll be used for their entrance ticket for the next day. Um, to cover that information still. So mastery for this, the exit tickets are not long. They range from 1 to 3 questions. Specifically for our first lesson, this one is 2 questions. Um, and so the mastery of this is looking for them to identify points on the line and also for
Mhm.
them to identify the slope. That's the first question. And the second question is how to write an equation correctly.
Mhm.
Because especially if we're getting into mx plus b, they can sometimes switch their B and their M, which is their y-intercept and their slope. But a constant reminder that M is equal to their y-intercept because at this point, they've seen slope defined as so many more variables than just M. It can be A over B. Once we get into exponential functions, slope is going to be also known as A. And so getting them to remember that when we're talking about linear functions, the slope is the variable of M. So that's what the mastery looks like for this exit ticket for this specific lesson.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. How many exit tickets do they take in like one session of class, like during those 90 minutes? Just that one exit ticket?
So during crescendo, it's as many lessons as we cover in the day. But for a typical just 90-minute block, it'll be if it's a 2 day lesson, they'll take their first part of their lesson will be lesson on Monday. Let's just say I see them on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They'll do their first lesson on Monday. Wednesday they'll do the second part of their lesson, and then that will be their exit ticket on the second day. Or if it's just a 1 day lesson, then they'll take their exit ticket at the end of the day.
Okay. And is it all on exit tickets? Like, is your data all based on the exit tickets for like the reteach or like how it's going? Or like, are they ever going to take like a summative assessment, like at the end of the like a certain amount of lessons that they covered?
So for Crescendo, there is not a summative assessment. The summative assessment for Crescendo is the
The
star.
star.
Yeah. But if for my regular algebra class, they do have end of module assessments, end of unit assessments. The big thing with my retesters is making sure that they, at this point, Crescendo is just drill and kill. So like we're just drilling it into you so that way you can understand it. So that way when you get to the star, you can kill it.
Gotcha.
Makes sense. Yeah. Um, one another question, Chris. Can you show us an example of a strong example versus a developing response?
Beautiful. So if we're looking right here, this is my exemplar. This would be what a strong student would give me. They
Mhm.
will identify the slope formula, which is here. The first thing is, well, this would be technically number two. So let me. So the first thing that they'll actually identify is a friendly point. So this is the first thing they'll identify, and this is the second thing, or vice versa. But they'll find 2 points because they know that they can't do the slope formula without 2 points. Once they get those
Mhm.
2 points, they'll plug it into our slope formula. Then they'll take the slope and plug it into our function. So they'll identify our slope, and then they'll identify the y-intercept, and then they'll plug it into our slope intercept form, which includes the slope and the y-intercept. So this is a strong response that I expect to see when I'm walking around and checking on
Mhm.
students and looking at their problems. The next thing is if I'm looking at three, let me zoom in a little bit. So if we're looking at three, a weaker response that we would need to push students to go a little bit deeper in is if they don't include the slope formula and if they just don't include what B is. Um, Most of my students can identify a point. Uh, the problem that we run into is like making sure that they don't plug it in incorrectly into the slope formula. And so
Mhm.
a weaker response would be either them just identifying the points and then just putting it into the slope intercept form, or them not understanding what the slope intercept form is at all, and then just putting it into a different form. Uh, which I typically don't see because slope intercept form is the easier form of the three. Um, so yeah, that would be what a weaker response will look like.
Interesting. And do you have a lot of students that even that try to avoid the answering of the formulas and just like literally will count from point to point and
Yes.
find their slope that way?
Yes, and so I I tell my students to do that if like if you're not comfortable with using the slope formula because my goal is to push you into using the slope formula so that way it's a lot
Mhm.
easier on you because with the slope formula you can just plug it straight into your calculator and then the
Mhm.
calculator will give you 1.5. They need to remember to convert this into a fraction and not leave it as a decimal though. So that's another misconception too. But so with my students, they'll count one, two, three, and then they understand rise over run, one, two.
Mhm.
And so those are for my students that are like new to math. So this is either their first year at KIP or their first year in America. And so they don't have that conceptual understanding yet of like
Mhm.
verbs or like even the key words. And so with those students, I have those exemplars up on the wall of how to find slope, what's rise over run, what does M stand for, so that way they can always look at my word wall and be like, oh, I need to find my slope first and able to use the slope intercept form.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So as the lesson is progressing, or do you have any check for understandings that you do even before they get to their um final answer?
So my Stratmo is what we call it. But so what I'll be looking for when I'm making my academic labs and making it intentional, especially like looking at number one, because number one is one of those problems where it's just like if they understand number one, I know they're going to pass this TEK specifically. But
Mhm.
looking at number two, this would be like our form that I'm looking for. So I tell them like, hey, I need you to highlight what slope intercept is.
Mm.
I need you to highlight what your slope is. And so that way we can build from there. Because
Right.
if they don't identify that and they don't put it on the paper, I don't know what's going on in their mind.
Right.
No, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like especially kids like that, like you were mentioning, like your EBs or your other kids that don't have that higher order level thinking, definitely need to write stuff out in order to process so that you could actually know what they're thinking. Because if only we knew what all the kids thought.
Right.
Yeah. And how are you going to determine if a student is ready to move on or if they need reteach?
The first thing I want to be looking for is them identifying their slope formula. Because with it, if they're able to identify their slope formula and identify the correct points for the slope, then they can build very quickly. Um, that's the first thing I'm looking for to see if they're ready to move on to the next teak. If they're not ready to move on to the next teak, then I have them jump onto iReady, which prepares them to help them find the slope.
Can you tell us a little bit about iReady? Like, what is that? I don't know what that is.
Yes, I love iReady. So iReady is a supplement for math. Specifically, it gives our students the opportunity to take a diagnostic test at the beginning of the school year and see what level of math they're performing at. And then, so from there, it scaffolds up or scaffolds down wherever the student is testing at, so that way the students can understand. So a lot of my students, like when they're talking about math, some of them don't understand simple long division, so iReady will scaffold if it's a division problem or if we're dividing polynomials. They'll start off with just basic division and then they'll progressively get harder. But the thing is, iReady walks them through each step. So that way there's also like always a little teacher there that they can click on to tell them, okay, this is your next step.
Okay. So like it's tailored individually to each student needs, right? Like it kind of makes its own little plan for each student based on their like progress.
Correct.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, because I have a question because we employ iReady as well. So
Hmm.
one of the struggles that I have with it is that the diagnostic test at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
So as I do fifth grade, some of the times students that are, far below the level they might get assigned a second grade level. I've had kids even as low as kinder level, right?
Hmm.
But however, that's I would say so obviously the rigor differentiates as according to whatever grade level you get. So whenever they are on their own pathway, it's difficult just kind of like having them on their pathway knowing that they're like for example me, it's so fifth grade is on level, they get assigned a kinder or first or second grade, so now they're like counting or like so it's very much below. Do y'all have the same issue um going on with y'all as well?
Yes. So I'm specifically thinking about my lower students that are in the retesting class. I have one child, he's testing at a third grade math level, but he's also in algebra and geometry. And
Oh.
so with that, I'm like, I understand why you're in the retesting class. And so I make sure that he has the opportunity to practice on iReady
Mhm.
because I understand me standing up and like teaching a lesson about slope, he's not going to really understand because he's not getting the concepts of it yet. And so from there, let him practice iReady when they get to their independent practice. Specifically for crescendo, it's the practice of the actual lesson because what I want to
Mhm.
see is how much information he has retained from what I taught and how much he can actually apply onto the paper. From there,
Mhm.
for him, he also has an IEP also, so I have the opportunity to take out a couple of questions for him not to practice on, so that way he can get more time on iReady, so that way it just builds up his math foundational skills.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Got you.
Yeah. Thank you.
How long has the crescendo thing been implemented at your school? Because I want to know the success rate of like how this works and like the reteaching and like the drill and kill method. Like, is that being successful?
It has been successful. So, one of the teachers that I helped coach last year, she did English 1. And
Mhm.
so during the crescendo season, like it was a lot of drill and kill about like thesis and themes and hooks. So they got to practice that during the crescendo. And then she was one of the higher scoring people in the district for the English 1 passing, for passing the English 1 star. I think 78% of her kids passed the STAR test the first time. So,
Wow.
Mhm.
That's
so
awesome.
there is evidence behind it, and the beautiful thing about crescendo is because coming from a previous district where we didn't have crescendo, it's just like it's kind of shooting in the dark and trying to figure out what should we really focus on. But crescendo is just like the teacher's going to be up there for 15 minutes at most to model this, and then the students need to practice themselves. Especially when it comes to math, if the students are not practicing themselves, they're not going to retain the information.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Sure.
definitely something I need to practice. Awesome. So are we
Absolutely.
on instructional and engagement?
Yes.
Okay.
So for the instructional movement and student engagement, the first question that we want to talk about is which part of the lesson will be the most challenging for our students. And looking through the lesson, it should be pretty lightweight to get through the lesson. I think the hardest part of the lesson will be question 1 here with identifying the X and Y intercepts, and then also the zeros.
Mm.
So the reason why I say for number 1, finding the X and Y intercept is because my retesters, my students haven't made the some of them have not made the connection that if it's an x-intercept, my value of x is going to be different and value y is going to be 0, and then vice versa. If it's a y-intercept, my value of x is going to be 0, my y value is going to be different. um and so when I'm like, okay, what's the x-intercept, they look at me and they're like, what are you talking about? Okay, where does the line cross the x-axis? What's that? Oh, Lord Jesus. At what point does our line cross the line that has an X on it? Oh, well, then why didn't you just say that? So it's just like the scaffolding of like understanding what I'm
Hmm.
asking for, because I can't just look at them and be like, oh, find the roots. What are the zeros? They're gonna be like,
Right.
oh, what does that mean? And so, especially with me coming from another district where I taught calculus, it's just like, oh, okay, so I can't just be like, find me the roots of this graph, because they're gonna look and be like, ain't no tree on this graph. What do you mean find the roots?
Roots.
Yeah.
So I think that's gonna be the part of the challenge, first part of the challenge for the lesson. The second part of the challenge for the lesson is going to be understanding what are the zeros and the y-intercept for the function, because
Mm.
this function is given to them in standard form, and so their previous teacher before I came and taught them always told our students to take standard form and convert it into slope intercept form and then find the answers from there. But even if you convert this into slope intercept form, you're not going to find the x intercept. It'll give you the y intercept, but then you'll also run into the problem of if you didn't solve or if you didn't manipulate the equation correctly, that you're not going to get the correct answer for the y intercept. And so getting students to understand, like, if I'm looking for the x-intercept, then I'm going to put in 0 for y. And if I'm looking for the y-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for x. My students also have a hard time understanding what direct substitution means, or like plugging in a value for a variable, because it's just like, okay, if I'm plugging in 0 for x, what's 2 times 0? And they're like, well, where did the 0 come from? We're plugging in the value of x.
Hmm.
So, like trying to reteach that, because I think, and with KIP, students take Algebra 1 their 8th grade year. We don't have 8th grade math, so they go from 7th grade math to Algebra 1. And so from Algebra 1, and then they move on to geometry. And so the students have seen this information since 8th grade. And with finding y-intercept, they've been working with that since 6th grade. And so I'm trying to I'm trying to challenge myself to find a new way to show them how to solve this correctly, especially since they've been introduced to it so many times.
Yeah, no, it's difficult, I'm sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. How many classes of the crescendo do you teach, or is it just one?
So I teach 3 classes of crescendo. Um, so this is crescendo right now. For my retesters, we'll hit crescendo again with them in April if they don't pass in December. And then my algebra one first time takers, I teach 3 classes of that. They'll have their crescendo in April also. So I have double crescendo in April. So it's like for me, it's a pretty light lift as a teacher because these are like targeted teaks each day, and like the lessons where we have to cover 3 to 4 teaks each day. That's why I really enjoy crescendo by itself because it gives you one teak to focus on at one time, and then we're gonna move
Mhm.
on to the next one that builds on top of it.
How many students are in each one of the crescendo classes?
So for my first period, I have 24, no, 26. My second one, I have 28, and then my last one, I have 30.
Well, I figured I would have had like a smaller group since it's like the retesters only, and you would probably want to do like more like individual time or like work one-on-one or in small groups, but they're still like normal size large classes.
Right.
Are you the only math teacher doing crescendo, like algebra one?
Yes, I'm the only math teacher doing the Algebra 1 retesters.
Copy.
And we currently don't have a sped teacher for them too. So my students with IEPs, they don't
Wow.
have those services now. Well, they have them and I still provide them, but like the sped manager will have to step in. But of course, she has her own caseload that she has to handle. So sometimes they don't get those extra supports in class.
Oh, wow.
Hmm. Um, are there any scaffolds and supports that you provide?
Yes. So for crescendo specifically, I have supplemental aids or just anchor charts. So it's the anchor charts that I have on the wall. I print them onto 1 page papers and they have a folder that they hold onto. So anytime that we're doing a crescendo exit ticket, they're able to reference their supplemental aid to use that on their exit ticket. Um, and then of course they also get to have access to their algebra reference sheet, which is provided through STAR, and then also they'll have access to Desmos, so that way Desmos can also like show them the calculations that they're putting into the calculator.
Mm.
Mm.
And Desmos is it's a digital
Yes, it's
tool.
a digital graphing calculator.
Oh, okay. Desmos. Gotcha.
And is the Desmos calculator aligned or like looks similar to the one they'll be using on the actual star?
Yes. So with Star being completely online, Star partners with Desmos, and that's the calculator that they use. Now, I did fall into this problem last year where my students, well, not last year, like a couple months ago, actually, where there's a practice Desmos and then there's a testing Desmos. So practice Desmos, you have a little bit more leniency and free things to do
Mm.
as to where like testing Desmos is like completely locked down. If you don't put this into the correct, if you don't put this equation in correctly, we're not giving you an answer. As to where the practice Desmos will be like, okay, let's go back and let's look at this equation and see how we can actually make it form a line.
Got you, got
Awesome.
you.
And do you have a lot of students that maybe conceptually master this, but have issues kind of like managing the calculator or managing maybe inputting it or the digital, like whenever maybe they master the physical calculator and then they have struggles with the digital calculator.
Yes, and so a lot of so with algebra they have access to a calculator, but a lot of the math that they should be able to that the math that they do, they should be able to do by hand. So the calculator is there just for an aid, and a lot of my students like rely on the calculator to find their answers. And so for my students that understand this, like actual pen to paper, understand this, they don't like to use Desmos because just like it's going to take me too long to plug it into the calculator.
That's interesting. That's
They're
interesting.
very far few in between, but yeah.
Okay. Look at that.
Does the reference sheet that they're gonna have on the star provide the formulas for them, or they have to
Yes.
memorize them?
The formulas are provided for them. Yes.
For the
Okay.
slope intercept and then the standard form.
Yes. So let me see. Star Algebra 1. I can't spell today. Reference sheet. So this is the standardized reference sheet that they all get. Not Etsy. Love this for us. But this is the standardized reference sheet that they will all have access to. So the big focus for this part of Crescendo is we're looking at linear equations, which is this part of our reference sheet.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
And then our
Is
next teaks will be talking about the properties of exponents.
is there any formulas that they need to know or memorize that aren't on that sheet? Or they're all provided?
They're mainly all provided. They just have to know how to manipulate them.
Mm.
Yeah,
Like how to isolate X or Y or things like that.
right. So
And
there's
the
not a
subset.
formula on here that's like, oh, here's the formula of how to find the x value or the x intercept. They need to be able to manipulate the equation to find the x-intercept.
I remember, I don't know what course it was, but I remember having a memorize the quadratic formula.
Yes.
It's
I
funny.
remember having to memorize the unit circle.
Yep. In calculus, yep. We
Yeah, I
had to do
remember
the
having to
units.
memorize the unit circle. And is there like
Really.
drills that y'all go over for them to know how to manipulate the formula when needed?
Yes. So during the first 3 weeks, well, not first 3 weeks, last 3 weeks that we just covered before we got into crescendo, I showed them multiple ways of how to manipulate each form that's given. So how can we go from standard form to point slope form? How can we go from point slope form to point intercept form? So that way they can find intercepts. So that way they can find their points and how they can find their slope. So there's practice been there. I haven't made those anchor charts yet, but they will be made soon to be put up on the wall. Uh, it's just we've had the practice, but the students like to have that extra like visual there, and I'm just like that visual's not going to be there when you get ready to take the STAR test. So I need them to practice it themselves so that way they can remember it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. How are you going to ensure that the students are engaged? And maybe if they're all engaged, do you have any individuals that, as they struggle, kind of become disengaged, or as the rigor of these lessons, increase, then they become disengaged?
Yes. So the way that I ensure that all students are engaged is my academic labs. And especially with this lesson, with Crescendo specifically, I'm not at the board the whole time. So that gives me the opportunity to walk around and actually see what students are doing. But if this were a lesson where I had to stand at the board for most of the time, it would be like me taking a step back. Hey, make sure you're writing this down. I'm collecting a quick data lab to see where all the students are at. Another way that keeps students engaged and they know that this comes to is if I see too many heads down or if I see students not engaged, I'll say the wind blows if. And so that means they have to pack up their things and move to another seat. So I'll do that in the middle of my lesson if the students are not engaged. So they'll know, okay, it's time for me to pick up my head and actually get engaged.
Right.
So like all the
Right.
students have to move, or just
All students. Because I'll
oh,
usually I'll usually call something that every student has. So I'll be like, oh, the wind blows if you have hair. Everybody has hair, so everybody has to stand up and move.
gotcha. And that's funny. And do you like also like kind of like target like the individuals that are disengaged like that too?
Yes. Hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So my whole purpose is for them to like move around because I really want the students that are in the front because typically my students are in the front are the ones that want to be fully engaged and like ask all the questions. I want to push them to the back and pull the students from the back towards the front.
Right.
And then I also have a ticket system in my class too where they can buy snacks, they can buy extra credit points, they can buy anything with these tickets, the first way, oh, you also have to buy your restroom pass with the ticket too. So the first way that you get your ticket is by being on time to class or sharing an answer or helping me out when I need some help. You get those tickets and you're able to purchase anything from the store.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome, man.
I love how you utilize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
I'm
love
definitely gonna start
Santos.
implementing that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd be surprised. Freshmen love it. I thought they would not like it, but they love it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, a thing with me, like when I'm doing like a monitor and adjust, I'll go around and monitor. And as that's happening, I'll like stamp their paper and they're overly excited. Because when they don't earn the stamp the first time around and they see like everyone else getting stamp, Miss, I got it. Can I get the stamp, Miss? I need the stamp, Miss.
Right.
And I've never seen 14, 15-year-olds excited for a stamp.
I did that my first in the first quarter, and what I actually did was once one student got all the stamps, I let that student go around and give other students stamps.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm gonna definitely implement that because then they're gonna not know how to act when they're gonna give other people the stamps.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay. What's next? What other questions do we have?
Um, so on obviously, this is math, but just as you spoke about, it requires a lot of vocabulary, and especially, in math, you could always address like the metacognitive. So do you have how will student talk and writing show higher order thinking?
So when we're looking at our practice, specifically number four was targeted for them to make sure that they're writing, because I believe writing is a fundamental part to math. And it
Right.
also gives them the opportunity to practice math so that way when they get to TELPAS testing and things and
Hmm.
testing of that nature, they're able to use the academic vocabulary. And so looking at number four, so they address the amount of miles which is their unit. They'll address decreasing or increasing, which is their slope. They increase
Hmm.
the number for their slope, and then per minute which is also their unit for slope. So that one specifically targets making sure that they write it. And because it says what is the meaning of slope of the negative 3.2. And a lot of the times in the problem will say interpret this problem or interpret your answer in terms of the problem. And so that tells them like, okay, I have to actually write a sentence here.
It's perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And do you have to manage the pacing across different sections of the lesson?
Yes. So with crescendo, it's very fast paced and quick. So that way it's just like practice, practice, practice. So the way I keep myself accountable is I have one student that like sits in the front, she or he, depending on who it is. Um, they'll get assigned as the time monitor for the class. And so I'll be like, okay, I'm about to model this problem, put 10 minutes on the timer, and I have a big wall clock where they can press the timer and start the 10-minute timer. And so then I'm like, okay, if y'all are talking during my model, I'm going to have to stop. And if you don't get the full model, you're going to miss out on the opportunity to understand what you're doing. So then my students understand, okay, let's be quiet for this next 10 minutes so Mr. Benford can get through the model, and then we can continue on working with our table group.
Absolutely. And what resources or support do you need like before teaching this lesson?
So the resources and support that I need before this lesson is make sure that my copies are made. Because as teachers, we're also printer fixers, we're copy fixers, we're
Right.
paper refillers. And so making sure that the resource is ready, so that way it's printed and so my students have access to it. But also the support too. Like we're supposed to be hiring a sped teacher to support the class very shortly. So hopefully that follows through. Because it's really hard to and like my specific class of 30 students, 10 of them are have IEPs and most of them are well, all of them are EBs. And then I have like five or six of them that have 504. So it's like really hard to like manage the classroom behavior while also making sure the content gets through.
Yeah, makes sense. No,
Mhm.
I'm sure that will help out a lot. And you know, the sped, as I obviously after our sped class, but you know, as I you know, research the sped and like their practices more, I mean, it's so beneficial for like all students, you know, especially even like EBs, you know, like to have like a lot of similar resources and like the things that they do, they could be implemented, you know, to benefit everybody.
I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely. Because I feel like more times than not, despite they have the IEP, I feel like a lot of students, despite they're not, categorized as SPED, they need those accommodations and help as well.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Let's see.
All right. Well, was there anything else? Any other questions that we have?
Um, Obviously you spoke about it briefly, but do you think you would have to make any adjustments or modifications after this discussion?
I definitely think I can scaffold a little bit further for some of my students. And then also, I can make sure that my students there who are EDs, because it's not just Spanish at my campus. I have students that speak Spanish. I have students that speaks Pashto, Urdu, and like those different languages. Because they're also some of them are Afghan refugees too. So making sure
Mhm.
like they have an understanding of what's going on. So like there was a problem in my previous lesson that talked about potato salad. Some of my students didn't know what potato salad was, so I had to like take a quick 5 minutes to like help them understand like it comes with potatoes, onions, because the problem was like what's the relation between potatoes and onions? And so it was a dish that we talked about. So things like that. So I really want to go back through the lesson and make sure that for my students that may not know that they can understand what's going on as
Right.
it relates to the problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, I
yeah,
think
that'd
that's
be
definitely
beautiful.
essential. Like knowing the
Yeah,
background information, because if not, we're just talking for the sake of talking.
Right.
yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and that's, you know, very culturally responsive. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. Well, thank y'all for this lesson planning internalization. Before we move forward, were there any other questions?
No,
No
I think that was
questions here.
it. Yeah, no, I think
Thank
Okay.
those
you.
kids are definitely ready to drill and kill the star in December.
Mhm.
I hope so. Thank y'all so much for
Thank
getting on this
you.
call with me and talking about this lesson that I'm delivering tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Let me stop the
Thank you for
recording.
sharing.
Thank
Of
you.
course. Here we go.